Welcome to the No Risk Sports Performance Podcast, where we discuss all things sports performance, from training to nutrition and recovery to individual and team victories on and off the field. I'm your host, Judah Boulay, owner of No Risk Sports Performance in Lincoln, Rhode Island. I'm ready to roll, so let's do this. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of No Risk Sports Performance Podcast. Today, my guest is Andrew Gregory. Andrew is a tennis coach / strength and conditioning coach at DePauw University in Illinois. Correct? Indiana. I'm sorry. I knew it was one of the guys. He's the assistant coach there, but his main role there outside of coaching tennis is making the men's and women's team stronger off the court so that they perform better on the court. He played college at Oliver Nazarene University, and he also has his CSCS. So, Andrew, you could probably do a much better job than I did introducing yourself and all your credentials and background. So why don't we have you do that before we get into the nitty gritty of some of the questions I have about sports performance and tennis?
Sure. So I've been coaching tennis for, I think, 12 years now. I've, probably a few more if you count coaching I did when I was in college and high school, but 12 years as a job. My first year I was a teaching pro at a club, so I did that for about a year. And then this is my 11th year coaching at the college level. And then I think about maybe 3 years ago, I got my CSCS certification. So I started doing a little more with that. A few years before that, I got a certification through the ITPA. It's like their certified tennis performance specialist. So it's kind of like the tennis version of the CSCS, that type of thing. So I got that a few years before I did the CSCS. So I kind of started down that path maybe 6 years ago. I always had a passion for the fitness side of sports and performance. And so I started getting into more of like the studying and the science behind it a few years ago, and then decided to get some of the certifications so I could do a little bit more with it if I wanted to, do more at the college level, strength and conditioning wise. A lot of schools are requiring that certification now. So yeah, I did that. I played 4 years of college tennis, 3 years of college basketball, and then worked for a year at a club. And I've been at DePauw for 11 years now. So I do both the men and the women there. We coach both teams, and both teams are in the same season. So very few off days when we're in season. And D3 is a little bit different rules wise. So I can't technically, once I got the strength certification, I can work with our players in the off season. Before I had the certification, I wasn't allowed to do anything with them in the off season if you're strictly a coach. But if you're a strength coach, as long as it's open to every athlete on campus, then I could have my tennis players in there during a strength session, which we weren't able to do really much of that this past year because we were under so many COVID protocols that the weight room was tough to get into. Numbers were limited. So now I guess technically I can do some stuff in the off season with them as long as it's open to everyone and the university. So I guess basketball players could be in there. We could have lacrosse in there. So as long as it's open, I can work with the teams. So we typically will give them like a strength and conditioning plan to do during the off season, and then they have some options of doing like what we have PES, performance enhancement series. So we do some of those like where it's like speed, agility, plyos, that type of thing. Some of the strength coaches will rotate and run one of those a couple times a week. So the players have that option in the off season. And then they also have a program that I put together for them. So yeah, I've been doing that for a while now. I enjoy it. I love doing, I think, both sides of it, the tennis skill part, the matches, the tactics, and then I also like doing like the off-court strength and conditioning stuff where we're trying to find a way to transfer some of that to the court.
And that's cool. So, you've only been doing the strength and conditioning portion for, you said, 3 or 4 years?
Yes.
So who was doing that for the team previous to that? Was there somebody, or was it just something that was like overlooked and neglected?
So really, when I started, it was 11 years ago, we didn't do anything strength and conditioning wise. The head coach has been there now, I think, 20 some years. And we didn't do anything strength and conditioning wise. And I was 2 years out of college, so I was still kind of learning. And I'd had experience because I played basketball and we had to do strength and conditioning stuff in basketball in college, and same with tennis. We did a little bit of that. So I had some type idea, but we weren't doing anything as a program. And then I think my second year, I talked to our head coach and I just said, hey, we've got to get the teams doing something in the weight room. We were having a ton of injuries every year, and we were having in D3, they're not required to do anything in the off season. So they would come in the start of our spring season out of shape. Then we'd start killing them with practices and matches. They'd start getting hurt. So I was just like, hey, we've got to get something going. And so I started doing, I think it was 2 days a week in season. We would do, I'd take them into the weight room. We'd do strength and conditioning. And it wasn't like the most specific stuff they needed or probably the right thing they needed, but it was something and it was helping, because obviously I didn't know the right way to program, the right way to periodize a schedule. I just had an idea of kind of what we needed. And so we were doing some stuff. And so that actually helped prevent some injuries. We started getting a little bit stronger. And then about 3 years ago, I got my CSCS. And so then I was more on like a more official capacity. So I technically was doing all the strength and conditioning stuff, the speed, agility stuff, but I didn't really have my credentials until maybe 3 years ago. And then I was able to do it on a more serious level and help out some of the other teams as well.
What's the biggest difference in the teams that you found from not doing anything to doing something before you got your CSCS, and then now with the amount of experience and training that you've had, in terms of like what's like the biggest differences you've seen between those three segments?
So I would say obviously before we were not doing anything, the biggest thing is we were getting hurt a lot, because guys would come in or the girls would come in unprepared, and we had a lot of injuries. And so when we transitioned to the weight room, we may not have been doing the exactly right thing we needed to do, but we were doing something. And so we started to build some general strength, which actually helped, I think, our durability a lot. I think we stopped having some of those nagging injuries. We started to perform a little bit better later in the season. I would say then I was probably doing, maybe the volume in season was probably too high, and we were pushing them maybe a little too hard. So I think from the mental toughness side, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I think physically in season, when your tennis court is such a hard surface, when you're practicing 5 days a week, you're competing 2-3 days a week, I think it's a lot of impact. And so I think the volume was probably a little too high. I think the good probably outweighed the bad, because we were preventing some of those injuries we were getting beforehand, because we just basically had no base, no strength base, no endurance base. And then I would say now the volume is much lower, but I'd say we're a lot more specific. So I think we're getting more of kind of the improvements in like power and speed than maybe we were before I had my credentials and I really understood the energy systems and how to manipulate some programming. So I think endurance wise, I think we were good before, because we were doing so much. I mean, we'd do some circuit training. We would do a lot of interval stuff on the track. So we were doing a lot. The volume was a bit too high, but endurance wise, we were good. And I'd say now we're focused more on, we'll do more endurance based stuff at the beginning of the season, but I would say now we're focused more on maintaining power output throughout the season, making sure we're still moving explosively late in the season. So trying to stay fresh while keeping like the intensity of our training high with the volume low, so that we can kind of peak at the end of the year and still be maybe serving as hard as we were at the start of the season, or getting to as many drop shots as we were getting to. So just making sure we're moving as well. So I would say now we're doing a much better job of improving and maintaining the areas that really show up on the court. Because I would say obviously endurance is a huge part of tennis, but the points are so quick. They're anywhere from 3 to 20 seconds. 20 seconds is very high for a point too. So it's really short bursts. So you have to be able to maintain that power output throughout the match. And so I think we're doing a better job of that now than we were beforehand.
Cool. So that brings me to another question now, because back in the day when I followed tennis, and that was in the early 90s, so I'm dating myself. There was a difference between the men and the women's game then. And as the game evolved, yeah, is there still a big difference between like the men's game and the women's game in terms of like the time of each point and the style of game, or has that like the difference, the gap lessened?
Yeah, I would say you're typically going to get some longer points in women's tennis. I wouldn't say it's like an extreme difference, like there's a ton, but I would say they're not really getting as many free points with the serve, especially at our level. Like we don't have girls that are hitting tons of aces or drawing a bunch of errors with their serve. It's more you're actually hurting more with your return, because girls serve, especially second serve, sometimes they don't do as much with it, and they kind of have, it seems like a lot of them come in with the mentality that, I just got to I just got to start the point and then I can get in and do my thing. And so they don't really think of using the serve aggressively and attacking with it. Whereas seems like our men have more of the mentality of, I want to, almost like a pitcher, like I'm trying to think of what I want to do with the serve. I've got to attack, maybe kick it out to this guy's backhand, and then I'll get the ball I want where I can hit into the open court. So that type of thing. So I think some of that is, and I wouldn't say all guys are like that, but I'd say the majority of guys think of trying to be a little bit more offensive with their serve than the women players. And I would say the points are typically a little bit longer, especially in if you watch men's doubles and women's doubles. Like our women play typically one up, one back the whole time. So we'll have one girl back at the baseline, one girl up at the net. Whereas our men we're trying to get them, the majority of the time, not all of the guys do it based on their playing styles, but we're trying to get them serving and volleying and coming forward quite a bit. So obviously in that, if you're doing that, the points are going to be quicker. You're going to end it much earlier. Right. Whereas the women, sometimes you're going to have, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ball rallies, and then someone finally picks off one. So I think doubles, you see the biggest difference. Mm-hmm. Singles, I would say the type of ball that the serve, and then the type of ball they're hitting. Guys hit typically a little bit heavier, so they're hitting a little bit more spin that's kind of pushing you back and have a little bit more racket speed, whereas women typically hit flatter, so they kind of block through the ball more and hit a little bit lower with less spin. So their ball is not quite as heavy, but it's a different type of ball that you're seeing most of the time. So I think guys generally just have a little bit more racket speed, and so I think they're able to heavy the ball up a little bit more.
Now, does the differences between the men's and women's game change how you train each team, or do you take the same approach to training both of them because you still want to develop that power in the woman like that you are developing in the men?
Right. I mean, pretty much training wise, we have the same goals for the most part. I mean, because it's such a rotational based sport. There's obviously you have to deal with the shoulder, the upper back when you're serving, and you need to have proper mobility to get in some of those positions serving, or just when you're on the run hitting open stance or whatever. I think so. Generally, we treat them training wise pretty much the same. I would say on court, you'll see more differences in like coaching than off the court. I would say the off court training, even like the speed stuff is very, very similar. We don't change a whole lot.
Okay, cool. No, that's good. I was just curious about that, just because of the starting points for the different athletes. Right. So you mentioned something there, and you said it's a rotational based sport. Give me 1 second. Fire truck just pulled up and
that's all right.
Idling right next to the microphone. So you said rotational based sport. All right. So do you train rotation or do you train anti-rotation when you bring them to the weight room?
So we do we do a little bit of both. I would say we're probably doing more rotation work maybe early in the season or preseason, and then in season we're probably doing a little bit more anti-rotation, because the volume they're hitting so much that they're getting a lot of rotation work every time they step on the court for practice or for matches. So we don't want to just overload that, and we want to make sure they're staying, durable, they're staying stable in those positions. And so I would say in season we do more anti-rotation. We'll throw in like some rotation work, like maybe as a warm up at the start of practice or something. We'll do like very, very low volume. We'll do a couple like max effort throws. each side. And then that's pretty much it. We're not doing a ton of that. And then occasionally we might do some core rotational stuff in the weight room as like an accessory at the end of a session. But we're not doing a ton of rotation in season. It's more anti-rotation. I think when they're not playing, that's when they need some more of that to maintain and to improve that. But so that's kind of the approach that I take with that.
So when they're not playing, train the rotations so that the body stays familiar with it. When they are playing, tackle the anti-rotation because they're getting so much rotation in the actual practices themselves in the sport itself. Cool.
Exactly.
Now, what's your favorite rotational training exercise, and what's your favorite anti-rotational training exercise?
So I would say, I guess my favorite would be, it kind of rotates. I like some of the med ball throws away from the body where you're kind of like scoop throwing it. Because that obviously gives you a little bit more of a translation to tennis. It's where if you're keeping it tighter, it's more, I think, geared towards movement. And then I would say it rotates between some throws, and I love pail-off variations. So we'll do some pail-off variations with some rotation in there. So we'll do maybe like a press, and then you release and go into like an explosive rotation. So we'll do some, so like you would press out. Okay. And then, so I bring it to my chest, press out, and then I let it go all the way back. And then I explode with a rotation.
Oh, cool.
So I let the cable pull my arms back, and then I'll explode. Yeah. So I do like a press and then a rotation.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I'll do some of those. So it kind of varies, I think, between the throws. I think throws can give you, I don't know. I guess maybe it's hard to tell. Throws might be able to give you the best maybe output you're looking for, because you can just completely release and launch it, especially if you're using like a lighter ball. I don't have them throw heavier balls a whole lot because it's not really going to help the speed. If we're looking for the amount of speed they can produce on their swings, heavier balls going to typically be a slower throw. So I try to keep them under like 6 pounds or under when we do some of those high powered throws. So I'd say that either that or some type of like pail-off variation with rotation, some type of cable rotation.
Okay.
And then anti-rotation, I love the pail-off. I think there's so many variations you can do. I think the different stances, you can go half kneeling, you can go full kneeling, you can go standing, narrow, wide. So I think there's so much benefit to that. So I'd say that's probably my favorite for anti-rotation.
I'm a big fan of the pail-off of those and all the variations that you have from it. James, one of the guys from our first session, he was showing me a one-legged mini band pail-off variation, and I'm it was like the hardest thing I think I'm good at pail-offs.
Yeah,
and it was legit, like very difficult to try to balance it on one foot while doing the pail-off, never mind having the mini band around your knees, trying to keep that like engagement of the glutes.
Yeah, that would be pretty tough for me.
Yeah. So cool. All right. So now we talked about like rotation movements in season and off season. What are some other key differences now that you are doing between in-season training and off-season training? Like, so how many days a week off-season are they hitting the weight room? How many days in season are they hitting? And what is like the philosophy of each that you have when you're training with the team?
Right. I would say like the program I put together for the off-season is, and obviously everything for them is completely optional in the off-season. We can't have anything mandatory. So I put together a program in place, and they have options of sessions they can go to in the weight room, but I can't make sure they're doing it. And I would say because we go typically from, I'd say October to end of January or February is the off season from the fall season to the spring season. So they have about 4 months in there. So I try to break it up. Maybe the first part of it, I program 4 to 5 sessions. Maybe the first phase, and then we go on the second phase, and it starts to drop down anywhere from 2 to 3 sessions right before season. So obviously the volume, we're doing more volume early in the preseason than later, and we get a little bit more specific late in the off season. So I would say, that we kind of gradually go down, and then in season we're probably hitting the weight room twice a week. And we're doing some on-court speed and agility stuff. We'll do that at the beginning of practice, so that I get them when they're fresh. And then occasionally we'll do some like capacity, some endurance work at the end, but we don't like late in the season, we're not doing a ton of that because they're playing so much. And if you play hard in a 2-hour practice, I mean, you're building the capacity that you need to play. So yeah, I would say we do a little bit more endurance maybe in the off season, and then the season we're not doing a ton of it, and we're maybe hitting the weight room twice a week in season.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Just in terms of, like you're playing your sport, and by playing the sport, you're building up capacity within that sport.
Right.
So there's no need to tackle sport specific training because the sport's doing the sport specific training.
Exactly. That's what they're doing. Yeah.
All right. So now college, you're dealing with all 4 years. So you have freshmen through seniors. What's the, so how do you see the transition from high school, from like your freshmen, so high school athletes coming into your program? What is the, what are the commonalities in terms of what you're seeing for them as athletes as they make that transition from high school to college? And I guess what's the commonalities? And I don't want to just say, but what are the common weaknesses?
Okay.
That you see as an athlete transitions from high school to college athletics and tennis?
I would say, especially the biggest thing is we have so many, and it seems like almost, I feel like at least 80 to 90% of the kids coming in from high school have little weight room experience, very, very novice in the weight room. Some of them maybe have had some private coaches and they've done maybe some on-court stuff, or they've done, a few of them maybe have worked with a trainer. But the majority of the players we get coming in, especially at our level, have spent very little time in the weight room. So a lot of it is they don't even have great relative strength, just for their general size. So the biggest thing is coming and getting them to manage their body, manage their body weight, and then we can start getting to start adding a little bit to it. Some of them we need to put on a little bit of weight. Some of them we just need to get their general strength up so they can maintain throughout the season. And then I would say, so that's one of the biggest things I see is just a lack of strength. And then the durability aspect, they don't quite have the capacity to maintain a whole season when they come in. High school is a little bit different, where it's not, I'd say there are some players that it's going to be physical at high school, but the difference is that an 18-year-old comes in, he's playing against 22-year-old guys, which 18 to 22 is a huge difference. You're playing guys that are physically mature, that have spent 4 years in the weight room or doing stuff off court. And so it's physically, you see a huge difference with, especially the men, I feel like, than more so with the women. An 18-year-old guy versus a 22-year-old guy is just a huge difference if they don't have a lot of experience. And then the college game just gets more physical, whereas the points tend to be a little bit longer. Guys are hitting bigger, guys are getting more balls back. So we may get a guy coming in who in high school, he hits a big serve and he's not seeing too many come back, but in college, they're coming back. So he's got to deal with that. He's got to work on having a better first step out of his serve. He's got to work on being able to handle what's coming back. And so I think, physical, just the physicality of it is probably the biggest thing. And so I think if they can come in with a better base and a better capacity, then it makes it a lot easier to transition. But most of the guys we're getting just don't have a lot of weight room experience. And I think that's kind of the way tennis, just the nature of tennis. It's not like a big weight room sport. I played basketball and we were always in the weight room. We were in the weight room in the mornings and then we'd practice in the evenings or whatever. So it was kind of common for us. Whereas tennis, I played high school tennis and college tennis, and we never went to the weight room in high school for tennis. And then even in college, our coach didn't know anything about it. So we did very little. He'd open up the weight room twice a week and we just kind of have free reign. So it really wasn't organized. It's just kind of the nature of the sport. So I think kids come in and they're not really used to that mentality. Well, like, why am I doing this? I don't need to lift. I mean, I can hit the ball, I can serve fine, I can move. I don't need to get big and bulky. But I think it's getting them to understand that it's not necessarily about adding size or bulking up. It's more of, being able to stay stable in the positions that you're getting, because tennis puts you in so many different positions, unilateral positions, off balance positions. And so you have to be able to control your body weight, your mass and your momentum, and you have to be able to get out of those positions quickly. And if you don't have the stability, the strength, just even the rotational and anti-rotational aspects of it, then it's going to be very tough to transition from the high school to the college game. So I would say, yeah, the physical aspect and just the lack of strength and lack of stability is the biggest thing I see.
Cool. Yeah. So I was curious, like, if you thought that was something more tennis specific than other sports, and you answered that. So
that's what it seems. I think just the mentality of tennis players is different than some of the. It's way different than a football player, obviously.
Right.
They grow up in the weight room, so it's like second nature to them. Where it's tennis is just not common.
Right, and that durability aspect also comes from being from the increased strength. So
exactly.
If you increase strength, you give them more power, and then they also make them more durable to withstand some of those matches.
Exactly.
So, all right. So what are your, like, I love like hacks and like just like the quick go-tos, so like if you had to nail it down, where like if you were only given 5 exercises at most that you could do with your athletes, right, to make them better on the court, and these could be weight activities, these could be speed drills, these could be whatever, right? So if you were only limited to 5 exercises, whatever they may be, what would those 5 exercises be to help you make somebody more dominant on the tennis court?
Okay. So I would say strength wise, probably my number one would be some type of rear foot elevated split squat. I love that exercise, and I think it's we do it a lot throughout the year, and I think there's a lot of variations of it. You can hit some different spots just by foot placement. You can make it reactive if you kind of strike the ground and then explode up. So yeah, I think that would probably be my number one strength exercise for tennis players. And then obviously the pail off or variations of it, whether it's a press, whether it's a hold, or some type of cable rotation. I think that would be in there. I would probably keep some type of med ball throw as well.
Okay.
Whether it's a slam, a rotational throw, or a press throw, something to that nature. So, and then
you got 2 more.
2 more. I would say probably I love to do ball toss reactionary drills. Okay. So it could be just a one, or it could be like a change of, like where I just drop it, they go to it, or it could be a change of direction where maybe I say go and they have to backpedal, and then when I release the ball, they have to respond to it, take off and get it before it bounces twice. So I'd say some type of ball toss reaction. And then, gosh, number 5 is tough. I'm trying to think of what one would be. I would say maybe I would go with, maybe I'd go with some type of press, I guess. I think that would be, I think there's so many variations of that, and obviously we wouldn't want to neglect upper body. So I'd maybe go some press variation, whether it's cable, whether it's dumbbell. But yeah, I would say if you could do those 5 things, if you only had 5 options, I guess those would be pretty good options. I think for tennis, you're getting some upper body, you're getting some lower body, you're getting some speed, reaction, agility, some power with a med ball. So yeah, that would probably be what I would go with.
All right. Those are all very good options. There's so many. It's such a difficult question. It's almost like a loaded question. I hate to throw that at you. One other question I had, just because of the difference between the men and the women's game, is that there's been a lot more injuries overall between men's and women's. And so like women typically have more knee injuries than the men. Are you seeing that as well, or how do you work with the woman, knowing to help make knee injuries preventable for them or lower their risk of getting a knee injury during the course of like their tennis career at DePauw?
Right. I think a lot of it is we do like, especially early on, especially when they're first coming in as freshmen, we do a lot of like we'll do a lot of single leg body weight stuff. So we're working on managing and building more relative strength, and then maybe we'll increase that. We'll add some maybe weight vest, or we'll add some weights to it. So I think a lot of it is doing that, and then we have seen more so than with our women than our men. And we don't see a ton of injuries, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But we had our number one girl, I think 3 years ago, just kind of a freak accident. She just slid for a ball on spring break and tore her ACL. So that was like in the middle of the season, and somehow she was able to come back without surgery at the end of the year and played doubles with a torn ACL in the conference tournament. So yeah, I don't know how she did that. But yeah, so we've never had anything serious like that with the men. So I think it's the way the women's hips are structured. It puts them at a more risk for that. So yeah, I think the more we can build like hip stability, core stability, and just make sure we can control like body weight and single leg positions, I think is really helped us in that area. Whereas we've had the one ACL, but we don't typically have a ton of knee injuries with our women
That's good.
players.
That's good. All right.
So
So I don't want to keep,
but
yeah, no, knock on wood, right?
yeah.
I don't want to keep you too long, so we'll hit the my final questions that I ask every guest.
Yeah.
Everything you've said so far has been super informative. I've learned a lot just from listening to you, just about the college game, and the different seasons and how you structure your programs. But so I'm a big fan of quotes. You know, like I'm always like, I got these email lists that come in, and it's mainly just like quotes, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool quote, that's a cool quote. So I ask every guest if they have a favorite quote that you sometimes always refer back to, or that you use to like motivate your athletes, or you know, or it's just some like a personal mantra or something, whatnot. So do you have a favorite quote?
Yeah, I would say it's not like a widely known, and I don't know if he made it up or if he got it from somebody, but I had a trainer when I was in college. So when I'd come home, he'd spent some time in the NFL. He was running back at IU, and then he was in the NFL for a few years. And so he trained me and my buddy, and he was like just all about mental toughness, all about like everything was really hard. We never had an easy day. Everything was really hard. So like mentally, I mean, that was the best thing I ever did. Like for me, for mental toughness aspect, I felt like I could do anything when I was, you know, getting through. If I could get through this workout with him, then I could do anything. So that was kind of the mentality. And he always would say, if we're struggling on something, he'd always say, athletes always find a way. So that's what he would just throw that out there every time. So he'd be like, athletes always find a way. So we're doing maybe a 60-minute bike ride, and he's just killing us on intervals or something, and he would just throw that at us if we feel like we're like struggling or gonna quit. So it was, yeah, I think that was just something that, and I just will never forget that. I always felt like it helped when you do that. It just give you a little sense of motivation. And
right. That's cool. I like that one. I like that. Athletes always find a way. My next question I always ask is, once again, I'm not only a quote person, but I'm a book person. I have a stack of books that are on my to read list.
Yeah.
And as I do these podcasts, I get more and more. So it's a good thing and a bad thing. But if you had to recommend one book, and the book could be about training, it could be about tennis, it could be about life, it could be about motivation. But if there's like one book which you had to recommend, and you said that, like, you know, like everybody coming in or to your program should read this book,
yeah,
what book would that be?
I think that would probably be The Inner Game of Tennis.
Okay.
It's like unbelievable for the mental aspect, because obviously tennis is such a mental game. You're out there by yourself, and you're fighting against an opponent, you're fighting against yourself, you're fighting against fatigue. And so yeah, I think and it's about like the main focus is shutting off the analytical side of your brain and just letting the other side take over, that you've hit thousands of balls, you know how to swing, you know how to hit this certain shot. So if you think about what you're doing mechanically on the court, you're going to struggle. But if you shut that off and you just react and respond and do the things that you physically know how to do, then you'll be a lot more successful. So it's really, I mean, it goes into way more depth than I'm giving it credit for. But yeah, it's a lot of it's just about like the mental side of things and shutting off that analytical side, and then being able to just kind of be an athlete and let your body take over.
Is it cross-disciplinary? I know it focuses on tennis, but like a lot of the
And
principles can it be applied to other sports?
yeah, definitely. It could, I think, like I know a really good basketball trainer that was promoting it to some of his guys, some of his basketball guys. So I think, yeah, for like the mental side of things, it's amazing. I don't even think the writer was a tennis guy or a tennis player.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure that he didn't even play tennis. So yeah, I mean, it's really, for tennis guys, it's like well known. Like it's one of those
Right.
books that there are a lot of guys are like, if you're struggling mentally, you've got to read The Inner Game of Tennis.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Thought you were going to say the Agassi autobiography.
I've got a signed copy back there though. Yeah, that's a good one. He's my favorite player ever. So
was it? Yeah. So he was mine growing up.
Yeah.
I'm a little older than you, but I when he first came on the scene, that's when I was like involved in, playing tennis, and like I watched the rise. So it's funny reading that book, hearing about like, because like you envision like all these guys on the court and like they play each other, but like they're all friends and chums.
Right.
And no, because like you got that innocent, naive, like like view of the world, and then like just to hear the stories, I was like, oh wow, like it was eye opening. It was a solid read. All right, so my favorite question, and this is just a a question I have, is that what are your 3 keys to success? So whether it's like personal keys to success or the keys to, usually personal keys to success or your keys to success for like you're going to relate to your athletes, but like what are your 3 keys to success?
I mean, I think what I would tell any of my guys or even myself, I think it starts with, you have to have the work ethics. You have to be willing to put in the work and put in the time. If you really want something or you really want to improve something, you have to devote your time to it and be disciplined. And I would say my second one is character. I mean, it shows. Tennis is one of those sports too. If you see like guys are calling their own lines out there at our level. So it's not the pros where we have every match chaired. You're calling your own lines. And so it's really evident, out there. And so I think it carries to life. And so I think if you show poor character on court, it's going to carry over. And so I think a lot of it is teaching them, you have to have the work ethic. You have to have high character, because it's not always about winning and losing. I mean, everyone wants to win, but I mean, it's more important to do things the right way. And then I would say probably my last one is discipline. So I think if you have a strong work ethic, you're high character guy, and you are disciplined in the way you perform jobs, whatever it is in your sport or just in life and training. I think those 3 things, I think you can be successful in pretty much anything you do or anything you choose to do.
Cool. I like all 3 of those. So what happens? So since you guys, that brings up another question about the game at the college level, like player calls a shot out that obviously was in, like, is there any recourse, or is it just like suck it up? And
so if we're playing like another Division III team that's usually regionally ranked or in our conference, we typically get 2 officials. So we have 2 officials that'll rove the 6 courts or the 3 doubles courts. So you're playing 3 doubles first and then the 6 singles. So there's 2 officials for 6 courts. So they're kind of roving. So maybe the official's on your court when it happens. If he's on your court and sees it, you can appeal to the official and you go, hey, was that ball in? And then he can overrule, or he can say, no, the call stands. But you have to verbally appeal to them. But if he's not on your court, I mean, you're just going to be like, come on, man, I saw that in. Are you sure? That's about all you can do. I mean, you can't really, there's nothing, like I can't overturn a call an opponent made. It has to be an official out there on the court that sees it. But when you get to like the nationals, they're chairing a lot of courts. And then it obviously depends on like the budget. Like we don't have a budget to get 6 officials per match. Where if you're like playing in the Big Ten, like IU has every match chaired, or Illinois has every match chaired. So it's a little bit different there. But yeah, so we typically have officials that will rove the courts.
That goes back to now a mental toughness thing, because how do you train, like, so a player makes a bad call, right? And your player's got it in his head and he's pissed off about that. Do you guys do any psychological training, like how to like just like, all right, it's done, it's over, move on to the next one?
Right. That's like what you just said right there is the biggest thing. Like we have to get through to them. It's because especially the younger ones that have a harder time dealing with that or haven't experienced some of that as much. It's like, okay, I know you lost that point, but are you going to let it affect you and lose the next so many points because you're still dwelling on that? Or are you going to let it go and then, just refocus and take care of business the next few points? So that's one of the hardest things. And I had the hardest time as a player with that. Like I had a hard time not dwelling on what's happened. Like I would get so frustrated and and then it would cost me a few points or a few games because I was still, upset about it. And so that's, I think, the number one thing in tennis is you have to have a short memory. You have to be able to get over things. And it's one of those sports that it's like, you don't have, I mean, you may get mad at a ref in basketball, but at least he's there watching everything, making the calls. Like your opponent's making the calls, you're making the calls. So, I mean, there's no one there. So you just have to, like, it's tough. Sometimes you get in a bad situation and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to let it go. And so, I mean, that's the hardest thing I think for tennis players to deal with, is just getting over some of that stuff and not letting it affect the rest of the match. So we've had some guys over the years that, like, I almost like hope a guy gives them a bad call, because then it like lights a fire and they get focused and then they just play lights out. Like we had a guy that happened to him in a tiebreaker and I think he won like the next 7 points because he was just like zoned in after the guy did that. And so some guys, yeah, it can positively affect them, but the majority, it's very tough. You just have to find a way to deal with it. Yeah.
Right. It's like, well, that same mentality, if they make a couple bad shots in a row, just to like move on to the next one. And like, you can't control what's happened. You got to focus on the things you can control and letting, yeah. So it's interesting because, like, there's a big psychological aspect to the sport, which I think goes underappreciated. And that's, and I'm sure that book goes into all of that.
Yeah.
So,
because it's not, I mean, it's not like we can sub them out. Like, hey, take 5 minutes on the bench, sit with me on the bench for 5 minutes and then cool down and then we'll get you back in. It's like, you're stuck. If you let something like that affect you, like if you let one game go, because sometimes that can be the match, like maybe you get broken the next game and then you can't find a way to break back and that's it. So it's like, yeah, you got, like, it's really tough. You gotta deal with it.
Right. All right. So we're running short on time. I know you're busy. So if you could step into my shoes and ask one question that I didn't ask, what would that question be?
I would say maybe how much time do you put into like speed agility training in season? Maybe that would be the one question I guess I would think of.
So solid question. And what would be the answer to that? How much time do you put into speed and agility training in season?
So obviously we do some, but the intensity or the volume is low. So like we do a lot of it in our warm up. So like on, I think 2 days a week, we'll do like I do actually Lee Taft's CSCS sprint program. So we progress for 12 weeks. So I do that twice a week. And then I'll do one other day where we do some type of reactionary agility in like just either during the warm up or right after the warm up. But we just get enough just to hit it a little bit. So we maintain. And then, because obviously in tennis, you're constantly doing agility when you're playing. You're reacting to the ball, you're changing direction. So yeah, it happens a lot. So we don't do, and it's very, very short duration. So we do pretty quick stuff and then it's over, just to maintain some first step and some explosiveness.
Cool. What's your plans for the summer? How do you keep yourself busy in the summer?
So I'm starting next week. I start my summer tennis program and then my tennis speed clinic as well. So I've got Tuesday, Thursday, the tennis program I do with a lot of the kids in the community, middle school and high school. And then I've got a tennis speed clinic I'm doing on Wednesdays. Same thing, middle school and high school players. So I'll do that throughout the summer. And then I do private lessons, and I run a big Midwest elevated tournament for the USTA at our facility end of July. So that's like a 3-day tournament. I get kids from all over the Midwest to come.
Good recruiting tool.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way. I mean, it's a great way to get them on campus. Yeah, I love hosting those. You have to put in bids to the USTA to get selected to host. So I'm always putting in bids every year, and I usually get maybe 2 to 3 of them. So it's an awesome way to get kids on campus. Like you said, we've got, I think, two of our current players have played in those tournaments, and that's how they were introduced to the school. So yeah, it's an awesome recruiting tool.
Cool. All right, Andrew, how can people get hold of you if they want, or follow you or whatnot, and your tennis exploits?
Yeah. So they can, you can always follow my Instagram, which is at AG_tennis_performance. And then my email, I think my email is on there as well. It's Andrew Gregory at agtennisperformance.com. So feel free if you want to contact me. And I also have a website with some programs, agtennisperformance.com as well. So you can find all of that. I think links to all of that on my Instagram as well.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the show notes too. So
sure, yeah.
All right, dude, this is awesome. Learned a lot, very informative. It's one of those, I think it's the tennis realm is underlooked in the sports performance world, and it shouldn't be, just because it's extremely necessary. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And then for listeners, until next week, train hard but recover harder. Thanks for listening to the No Risk Sports Performance Podcast. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, as well as checking out the show notes for more information on our guests. You can find us on Instagram at No Risk Sports Performance. Until next time, I'm your host, Judah Boulay, reminding you to train smart and recover smarter.